a fractured skull, multiple blunt force injuries, and a blood-soaked shirt wrapped around her head. These were the grim details of Sigrid Stevenson's autopsy report. The 25-year-old graduate music student was found murdered on September 4, 1977, in Kendall Hall at Trenton State College. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this case, despite the violent nature of the crime, investigators found no fingerprints, no footprints, and no clear suspects. How did the killer manage to commit such a brutal act without leaving a trace? Campus police discovered Sigrid's body on the stage of Kendall Hall, just feet from a piano. The gruesome scene stood in stark contrast to the peaceful setting of the music building. Sigrid was known for her passion for music and often spent late nights practicing in Kendall Hall. Her death sent shockwaves through the tight-knit college community. As investigators combed through the crime scene, they were met with a puzzling lack of evidence. No murder weapon was found, and there were no signs of forced entry. The absence of physical clues left detectives struggling to piece together what had happened to Sigrid Stevenson on that fateful night. This perplexing lack of evidence would become the hallmark of a case that continues to baffle law enforcement to this day. 2. The night before. The night before Sigrid Stevenson's body was discovered, she attended a local theater performance that would unknowingly become her final outing. On September 3, 1977, Sigrid joined about 30 other audience members for a production of 𝗓𝗵𝗄 at Trenton State College. The play, a modern retelling of the biblical story of Job, was well received by the small crowd. After the performance, Sigrid stayed behind, chatting animatedly with cast members about the show. During these conversations, Sigrid mentioned her plans for the night. She explained that she was locked out of her host family's home and intended to spend the night in Kendall Hall. This wasn't an unusual occurrence for Sigrid, who often sought out the solitude of the music building for late-night practice sessions. Kendall Hall, one of the oldest structures on campus, was notorious for its lax security measures. Many students were aware that the locks were easily bypassed, making it a convenient spot for those seeking a quiet place to study or practice. For Sigrid, a dedicated musician always looking to improve her craft, the building's grand pianos and peaceful atmosphere were irresistible. As the night wore on, the cast and crew of 𝗓𝗵𝗄 began to disperse. Sigrid's last confirmed sighting was around 12:30 a.m. on September 4th, when the remaining theater group members left Kendall Hall. She waved goodbye to her new acquaintances, unaware that these would be her final moments seen alive. Sigrid's journal, later discovered by investigators, provided insight into her state of mind that night. She had written about her frustration with the noise from the crew breaking down the set, expressing her intention to sleep early so she could practice piano in the morning. This entry not only highlighted her dedication to music, but also her desire for solitude and focus. The campus was eerily quiet that Labor Day weekend, with only about 50 students and staff present. This emptiness, while providing Sigrid with the peace she sought, would later complicate the investigation by limiting potential witnesses and suspects. As the clock ticked past midnight and into the early hours of September 4th, Sigrid's movements became a mystery. She had noted in her journal that she wanted to be out of Kendall Hall before 11 a.m., when security checks were typically conducted. But what transpired between her last sighting and the grim discovery of her body remains unknown. Sigrid's transient lifestyle in the weeks leading up to her death added another layer of complexity to the case. She had recently moved from a professor's home to a local fireman's house, suggesting she was searching for stability. This period of transition made it difficult for investigators to establish a clear pattern of her movements or identify potential threats in her life. As dawn broke on September 4th, Kendall Hall stood silent, harboring its tragic secret. The peaceful campus, still mostly deserted, gave no indication of the horror that had unfolded within the walls of the music building. It would be hours before Sigrid's body was discovered, hours during which her killer potentially walked free, leaving no trace of their presence. The timeline of that night is filled with gaps and uncertainties. Who else might have entered Kendall Hall after the theater group left? Did Sigrid encounter someone she knew, or was she surprised by a stranger? The lack of forced entry suggested she might have willingly let someone in, or perhaps the killer took advantage of the building's poor security. 3. A timeline of silence. In the early hours of September 4th, 1977, Sigrid Stevenson's tragic fate was sealed under mysterious circumstances that continue to baffle investigators. Stevenson was last seen at 12:30 a.m., but her body wasn't discovered until 11:30 p.m. the same day, leaving a critical gap that remains unexplained. The investigation faced immediate challenges due to the lack of physical evidence and reliable witness accounts. The campus, almost deserted because of the Labor Day weekend, offered few clues. A small yet significant detail was the discovery of Stevenson's green bike outside Kendall Hall, which campus police officer Thomas Catello had noticed in the same spot the night before, a building that should have been empty. This observation became one of the few pieces of concrete information investigators had to work with. However, reconstructing Stevenson's final hours proved frustratingly difficult. With no security cameras and scarce eyewitnesses, detectives were left to question students and staff who had been on campus that weekend. Unfortunately, no one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual around Kendall Hall. Further complicating the investigation was an unverified sighting by a friend who claimed to have seen Stevenson at a movie theater about 15 miles from campus after midnight. The lack of concrete details surrounding this sighting, including the exact time and location, left investigators uncertain whether it was a credible lead or a distraction. This ambiguity created multiple scenarios. Did Stevenson leave campus and return later? Was she misidentified? Or was the sighting entirely fabricated? Each possibility needed to be explored, draining valuable time and resources. The absence of physical evidence at the crime scene intensified these challenges. There were no fingerprints, footprints, or other forensic clues, forcing detectives to rely on witness statements and circumstantial evidence. Without concrete proof, narrowing down suspects or establishing a clear sequence of events proved nearly impossible. As days turned into weeks, the investigation hit numerous dead ends, and the community's hope for answers waned. Law enforcement officials, left with little to go on, found traditional investigative methods frustratingly ineffective. The passing weeks and months only made the task more daunting as memories faded and potential evidence disappeared. Despite these obstacles, investigators remained dedicated to solving the case. They re-interviewed witnesses and revisited the crime scene, hoping to uncover any overlooked clues that might shed light on Stevenson's final hours. However, as time went on, the mystery only deepened, leaving the case unresolved and shrouded in silence. 4. The crime scene puzzle. The crime scene in Kendall Hall posed a gruesome puzzle for investigators. Sigrid Stevenson was found face down on the stage, near the piano she cherished. The scene was marked by a violent struggle. Blood stained the floor, the piano bench, and even the sheet music. The forensic analysis of the blood spatter suggested that Sigrid was likely attacked from behind, raising questions about whether she knew her assailant or was caught off guard. One of the most perplexing aspects was a blood-soaked shirt wrapped around Sigrid's head. Investigators believed it was one of her own garments, possibly used by the killer to muffle her screams or placed there post-mortem as a twisted signature. This, along with the frenzied yet swift nature of the attack, added layers of mystery to the already baffling case. Another enigmatic detail was a white canvas piano cover draped over Sigrid's body. It didn't belong to Kendall Hall, but was traced back to a piano in 𝗓𝗄𝗄 Hall, a building nearby. This discovery raised important questions about campus security and access. Dr. Stanley Austin, a supervisor in the music program, confirmed that the cover should have been in Bray Hall, not Kendall. This revelation led investigators to suspect that the killer had inside knowledge of the campus or access to restricted areas. Despite the violence, the crime scene was disturbingly clean of physical evidence. No fingerprints, footprints, or DNA were found, and the murder weapon was never recovered. Initially, it was speculated that a 𝗕𝗂𝘁𝗵𝗶 piece of wood used to balance the piano might have been the weapon, but it was never located. This absence of forensic evidence suggested an unusually careful and knowledgeable perpetrator, raising the possibility of premeditation. Conflicting reports further muddied the investigation. Early accounts claimed Sigrid's wrists had been bound, but later reports contradicted this, highlighting the challenges detectives faced in processing such a complex scene. The crime scene's peculiarities left investigators grappling with more questions than answers. Why did the killer bring the piano cover from another building? Was it to conceal the body, or did it serve another purpose? The careful removal of potential evidence hinted at premeditation, yet the chaotic nature of the attack suggested a crime of passion. These contradictions made it difficult to develop a clear profile of the killer, leaving the case shrouded in uncertainty. 5. A killer without a trace. The autopsy of Sigrid Stevenson revealed a brutal murder, with medical examiners confirming her death was due to blood clots from multiple blunt force traumas to the head. 15 deep scalp wounds and skull fractures highlighted the viciousness of the attack, corroborating the initial crime scene analysis that suggested a frenzied assault. Despite the unsettling discovery of Sigrid's undressed body, the autopsy ruled out sexual assault, leaving investigators puzzled. Questions arose about whether Sigrid had undressed herself, possibly to play the piano nude, or if the killer had forced her to strip before the murder. This unexpected twist deepened the mystery and complicated the investigation. Adding to the investigators' frustration was the complete lack of physical evidence at the crime scene. Lieutenant Ed Shayer from Ying Township Police expressed concern over the absence of fingerprints, footprints, or biological traces, raising suspicions that the killer might have inside knowledge or even ties to law enforcement. In a bold move, Lieutenant Shayer ordered all campus law enforcement officers to submit their handcuffs and nightsticks for examination, hoping to find traces of blood that could link an officer to the crime. This decision underscored the growing suspicion that the murderer might be familiar with police procedures. However, despite these efforts, no evidence linked any officers to the crime, leaving investigators at a dead end. The autopsy report also noted ligature marks on Sigrid's wrists, which could have been caused by various items, including handcuffs. Assistant Prosecutor Paul O'Gara highlighted this ambiguity, fueling further speculation about the killer's possible connection to law enforcement. With no progress and few leads, investigators expanded their search beyond the crime scene, scouring nearby lakes for the murder weapon or other discarded evidence. These efforts, however, yielded no results, exacerbating the growing frustration among the investigative team. As weeks turned into months, the case remained mired in uncertainty. The lack of physical evidence and reliable witness accounts left detectives without clear suspects or motives. Theories ranged from the killer being highly skilled at covering their tracks to the possibility of a premeditated crime, but each new lead unraveled under scrutiny. The investigation also explored Sigrid's personal life, but no significant conflicts or suspects emerged. Some speculated about a transient outsider, yet the killer's apparent familiarity with the campus suggested otherwise. With no breakthroughs, the case reached a frustrating standstill, leaving both the community and investigators grappling with an unsolved mystery. 6. Unsolved and unforgotten. In the wake of Sigrid Stevenson's brutal murder, Trenton State College's response was surprisingly muted. The campus, still reeling from the shock of the crime, saw no significant memorials or public acknowledgments of her death. The administration's actions were limited to installing new lights and distributing a guide on campus safety. These measures, while practical, did little to address the emotional impact of the tragedy on the student body and faculty. Sigrid's family, overwhelmed by grief, chose to mourn privately. They held a small memorial service at Nassau Presbyterian Church, where Sigrid had once sung in the choir. Her final resting place is marked only by a simple gravestone bearing her name and dates, a stark contrast to the vibrant life she had led. The college's reluctance to establish any lasting memorials for Sigrid highlighted a broader trend of neglect towards victims in similar cases. This lack of acknowledgement left many students and faculty feeling unsettled and unsupported in the aftermath of the crime. The absence of a public forum to process the tragedy allowed fear and uncertainty to fester within the campus community. As time passed, the brutal facts of Sigrid's murder began to morph into something else entirely. The case, with its lack of concrete evidence and elusive killer, became fertile ground for speculation and myth-making. Urban legends and ghost stories started to circulate among students and faculty at what is now the College of New Jersey. Tales of supernatural encounters in Kendall Hall began to spread. Some claimed to hear the ghostly echoes of piano music late at night, while others reported seeing a spectral figure resembling Sigrid near the stage where her body was found. These stories, while unfounded, served as a way for the community to process the unresolved nature of the crime and the lingering sense of unease it left behind. The rumors surrounding Sigrid's murder took on lives of their own, often obscuring the truth of her tragic demise. Unsubstantiated stories circulated, ranging from claims that she was murdered by a boyfriend to tales of her being strangled with piano wire. These fabrications, while captivating to some, only served to further muddy the waters of an already complex case. Despite the passage of time, law enforcement remains committed to solving Sigrid's murder. Nearly 50 years after the crime, detectives continue to revisit the case, hoping that advances in forensic technology might shed new light on the evidence. This dedication speaks to the impact of the case and the enduring desire for justice, even as the trail grows colder with each passing year. The ongoing nature of the investigation serves as a reminder that some cold cases can still be cracked with persistence and new investigative techniques. It also highlights the evolving nature of forensic science and its potential to resolve long-standing mysteries. For the detectives involved, Sigrid's case is not just a decades-old file, but a challenge that continues to drive their work. The impact of Sigrid's murder on the community has evolved over time. What was once a source of immediate fear and shock has transformed into a somber reminder of the fragility of safety and the importance of vigilance. For many alumni of the college, the case serves as a dark chapter in their shared history, a story that continues to be passed down to new generations of students. Tragically, Sigrid Stevenson is now remembered more for the circumstances of her death than for the life she lived. Her legacy has become intertwined with the mystery surrounding her murder, overshadowing her accomplishments and the person she was. This shift in focus from victim to case study is a common and unfortunate aspect of unsolved crimes, where the search for answers can sometimes eclipse the memory of the individual lost. The case of Sigrid Stevenson serves as a stark reminder of the lasting impact of unsolved crimes on communities and families. It highlights the challenges faced by law enforcement in solving cold cases and the importance of continued efforts to bring closure to victims' families. The persistence of investigators in this case, despite the numerous obstacles and the passage of time, underscores the enduring commitment to justice in even the most challenging circumstances. 7. The enduring mystery. Sigrid Stevenson's murder remains one of the most baffling cases in New Jersey history. The complete absence of physical evidence at the crime scene continues to perplex investigators decades later. No fingerprints, no DNA, no murder weapon. The killer seemed to vanish without a trace. This lack of evidence has made solving the case incredibly challenging, even as forensic technology has advanced. Cold cases like Sigrid's highlight the importance of preserving evidence and detailed documentation, as new techniques may eventually shed light on old mysteries. Yet they also reveal the limitations of forensic science when crucial physical evidence is missing entirely.